And we are, as a people, inherently and historically
Wake up!
opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
The show that asks questions about why we don't ask questions.
What the hell is going on?
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Welcome to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. These are Conspiracy Queries. And I am Alan Park. And we've got a great guest with us today. His name is Jamie DeWolf. And he is of the clan Hubbard. And I mean Scientology. He's actually genetically linked to these characters. But he doesn't follow the family line, so to speak. Or the parts of the family that did follow the family line. All right. He's good, a pretty cool guy. He's got a lot of interesting things to say. And there's a bit of a cliffhanger at the end, because at the end we realize, oh, we need to talk more. But it's only a 1 hour show, so get over yourselves. So we'll have him back soon. We have to have him back soon. But first, let's get to some of these news stories that folks have been asking me to weigh in on. Hey, you never talk about the news anymore on your show, I've been hearing. Okay, fine, I got sick of it. It was nuts, but I hear you. And there's at least 5 or 7 listeners that want to hear my take on the news, so here's something. Obama says Afghanistan won't be perfect. Well, I guess not. I guess, especially after a 12-year invasion legacy and killing a bunch of people. Probably won't be the same ever again, I guess. But he's announced his plans to withdraw from Afghanistan. Remember those? When he got elected, I'm going to withdraw from Afghanistan. Yeah, well, he's following through on that finally. And the United States is finally leaving Afghanistan for good, except for those 9,800 troops he's going to leave behind. So that's why the pullout won't be perfect, because you're still leaving about 10,000 guys there, you idiot. All right, let's move on to the next thing. Speaking of the military, up here in Canada, it looks like the military is seeking an independent review of rape claims. I guess they don't want anybody thinking that it's an in-house deal. And so this is from well, let me say something. You know, sometimes when you're out and about, and maybe you've got your dog with you, or maybe someone else has a dog, and that dog leaves a stone on the road, you know what I mean? Like a soft stone. And maybe you should pick that up. What do you pick it up with? Well, a Kleenex or something would be great. Or there's something called 24. That's a commuter newspaper. That's what I used. It's about what it's good for. But it also had this story. Canada's chief of the defense staff says the Canadian forces will set up an external, independent review of the numerous allegations of rape on Canadian military bases. Yes, be all you can be in the army. And not just in the arm, but in the elbow and in the back and in the back of the legs and stuff like that. Look out! Military rape. Now listen, when folks are trained to kill folks and you're only getting raped, maybe that's not as bad as it sounds. Okay, let's see what this other one is. I don't know why you guys wanted to hear all this stuff. Oh, here's a good thing for Canadians. Pretty soon, cheaper banking is coming for low-income Canadians. Cheaper banking says the feds have cajoled Canada's chartered banks to create a low-fee and no-fee bank accounts for low-income earners, including students and senior citizens. Finance Minister Joe Oliver, bit of a scumbag, says the 8 biggest banks in Canada will introduce new accounts by mid-January. That's right, you only have to wait till about another half a year just to get a low. That's going to help us. That's the Canadian government stepping in to tell the banks what's up. And it says here that means access to no-cost accounts for more than 7 million Canadians are going to save almost $50 a year. Isn't that wonderful? They're going to give all those people $50 a year. Isn't that fantastic? They're so great, the Canadian government, when all they really have to do is go back to the Bank of Canada and set it up the way it used to be before, when we used to fund our own projects at like 1 and 1.5%, etc. That's where that wonderful health care came from in the first place. That's what they can do, and they know it. But instead, they're trying to win points in a right-wing rag, getting people to think, ooh, I'm going to get 50 extra bucks next year. You're being lied to again. Number 4 story is the Pope believes in celibacy for priests. Well, does he really? Well, it says here, Pope Francis has said he believed, that's always a key word with these folks, that Roman Catholic priests should be celibate, but the rule was not unchangeable dogma. And, quote, here we go, the door is always open to change. Well, that's not the only thing the door is always open to, folks. It's always open to, well, didn't this Pope Francis have the highest measure of internet pornography being downloaded into the Vatican right after he assumed the helm? I think he did. I know he did. I reported on it last year. You can find it in the archives. Here's the interesting thing about religion is that particularly with this Pope, he's an interesting Pope because, he came in after the previous Pope quit. Now, I know that's old news now, and people were talking about it at the time, but I guess I didn't really get across how odd I thought it was that replacing the Pope is impossible. How did they do this? If you recall that grandfather-looking Pope, that guy, John Paul, he was an old wrinkly doll guy. Even a lot of people really enjoyed him, thought he was really cute. He tried to quit. He told us he wanted to quit. He tried to quit the papacy, and they said, no, you have to be the Pope for the rest of your days. What are you talking about? Sorry, buddy. And they ran that guy into the ground. Okay, but why then when Ratzinger wanted to quit, they just said, yeah, sure, that'll be great, and had this guy ushered right in. I just don't understand it. I don't know why people were okay with that, and I don't know why the media didn't show the comparison. Yes, it's amazing that a new pope came in because the other one quit, but the last time someone tried to do that, they told them they couldn't do it. There's a lot of confusing things in religion, and especially some of the newer ones, like the one we're going to talk about today and hopefully dissect a little. It's Scientology, and it's going to be fascinating. So now let's just go to our interview. Jamie DeWolf. Now, you may not recognize that name, DeWolf, because, he kind of made it up, or he picked it out of somewhere, Jamie did. Jamie is the grandson of what they call the founder, I guess, or I like to call the creator of the newest religion you can think of. All the kids dig it. Snip off 4 box tops, send it in, and you can be an ascended master and play mahjong with Xenu somewhere. I don't know. It sounds nuts to me. If you're critical because I'm making fun of a religion, it doesn't just stop with Scientology, hey, so spread it around. I'm an equal opportunity offender by sure. And but today we're going to focus specifically as much as we can on Scientology because Jamie has the inside track. How could he not? He's a family member of the originator of this science fiction money grab. I mean religion. And I'd like to bring him on right now. Do I sound a little skewed to one side or the other? I guess I do. That's nothing compared to our guest, Jamie DeWolf. How are you?
I'm good. How's it going?
Very well, thanks. It's great to have you on the show. And I was sent a clip of yours performing, and I'd love to get a little lick of that on the show later, too. Man, this guy, ladies and gentlemen, he's got some things to say. And not only are they fascinating, they are things that other folks don't want him to say. So, of course, we need to have him on the show here. Jamie, you were born into the Scientology family.
Well, so the specific is L. Ron Hubbard is actually my great-grandfather on my mother's side, and his first child was my grandfather, L. Ron Hubbard Jr., who was a top-ranked member of Scientology for many of their early years and helped develop a lot of the original curriculum, a lot of their original ways of dealing with opponents and ways of bullying people. And he was an enforcer in many ways for the early days of Scientology. And then he ended up leaving the church, and he had my mother, and I was the first child of all of my cousins, and kind of the first one to start sort of poking around and asking questions about it. And I knew my grandfather as a child, but it was definitely a subject that no one wanted to talk about because at that point it was at its kind of fevered pitch because his father was in hiding and he was battling him nationally and taking it to the press, and then was in all kinds of litigation and had private investigators following him everywhere. So it's definitely a
So what was the time frame on that? What years are we looking at here, that transition?
So this is in the 80s. So Elron went into hiding for over 10 years, and he just ran from place to place, and then eventually was hiding on a ranch, and his son was trying to flush him out of hiding. It was an incredibly dangerous time for the church because at that point nearly everybody wanted to talk to Elron. A whole lot of government branches, a whole lot of lawyers, a whole lot of people would have loved to have him in court to defend himself, and he just vanished. He just completely just got himself off the map, and and his son was trying to flush him out. So when I was growing up, I always knew who L. Ron Hubbard was because I knew he was a writer. I knew he was a science fiction writer, and my grandfather actually gave me some of his books his sci-fi books with kind of like a little wink in his eye. But there was no discussion of Scientology when I was a really young kid. That was something they just kept the hell out of the household.
Were you guys, were your folks taking you to like a United Church or any other kind of religious deal on top of that?
Yeah, I rather hilariously grew up pretty strict Baptist Christian.
Okay.
So that was in many ways a lot of my family's reaction and kind of retaliation, I would argue, against like some of Scientology is to go the opposite and become very, very religious in the Christian faith. And so I grew up crazy Christian. And so the idea of being of any other religion, I didn't grow up Scientologist, thank God. I grew up Christian, which is a much more accepted.
So basically, in your home, then you had a sort of a what I like to call the superficial Christian existence that they kind of layer down as a template over top of everything else you do, and then your family, the older people were just we're just embarrassed about this L. Ron starting his whole thing, and it's just kind of a shame. That kind of vibe.
Well, it was actually a lot scarier than that.
Oh.
I don't think that they were just so much as embarrassed as that they felt it was incredibly dangerous to even talk about. That they had, most of my aunts and uncles were born in different cities. They had lived a life that was mostly on the run. A lot of the kids had been followed at some point. My grandfather taught all of my aunts and uncles like how to use the guns in the house. He was pretty specific that Scientology is incredibly dangerous, and they're a lot more dangerous than the world understands. And they're not just like wacky people with their wacky beliefs. So this is a very highly organized, very efficient, very dangerous opponent.
Do you know if they have any? Oh, sorry, go ahead. I was going to ask you if you know, based on that, do they have any? Are there any Scientologists, to your knowledge, in let's say the upper controlling bodies of government, such as a cabinet or a Congress or a Senate or anything like that you might know of?
Not that I know of, but it's certainly in the 70s. That was what a lot of them went to jail for, was for infiltrating several branches of the government and doing break-ins and destroying all the information that these different branches had on Scientology. Doing counter-espionage, as ridiculous as that sounds, was actually a very common weapon that they used against any of the oppositional forces. So that was what L. Ron Hubbard's wife went to jail for. She went to jail for Operation Snow White, which they basically broke in. They basically had Scientology double agents get hired and then break into the IRS, the State Department, try to get people in the FBI, breaking into psychiatrist's office, trying to smear different politicians by working as double agents. They had double agents work at the Occult Awareness Network and eventually consume that as well. I mean, this stuff is documented. The FBI raided their offices once they had been getting word about this, and they themselves were utterly shocked at the full scale of it. And I've always thought that was a little nuts. Scientology isn't really smart to bury it, as I don't think even most Americans are aware of that it was the largest domestic spying ring, in the last century. And it was perpetuated by the so-called fastest-growing religion in the world. Like, it was not a foreign government. It was not a terrorist, group or a militant group. This was a so-called religion, and they did it in a very highly organized and efficient manner. So, I mean, that's the thing, is that they really run themselves like some kind of crazy, like, little CIA gang. You know what I mean? They don't move typically like any other religion anybody else understands.
Well, I have a quick comment and then a question kind of based on that and what you're saying. I need to share this with you, and this is why I was so interested in you and what you're talking about. For some strange reason, when I was going to high school at 17 years old, I wound up taking a world religions class. It was an option, and I thought, okay, I don't know anything about this, so yeah. And one of the things I had to do was write a paper, an investigative style paper on one of these religions, and the teacher set it up like you're an intrepid reporter going on the inside, and she framed it that way. So I thought, okay, and everybody was going to church and talking to their pastor and talking to their rabbi and everything. I went down to the main street in Toronto where I lived, Yonge Street, and there was a Scientology building in there, always with these personality tests and all of this kind of stuff. And I thought, I'm going to go down there and talk to these guys direct. And it was so strange. Jamie, I was predisposed to think they were a nasty bunch. I was trying to present myself as a guy who might want to get cleaned up with their methodology. And the only thing was, I think you had to be 18 or 19 or something. And I was 17. So I went through everything. I answered a lot of questions. And as the gentleman was taking me through the building later on a tour, upstairs there was a desk attributed to L. Ron Hubbard. There was a picture of him behind wearing a little sea captain thing. And this would have been 1979, 80. And he's saying, yeah, and he's saying, well, he's, we don't know exactly where he is right now, but that doesn't matter. He's, just spinning this kind of nonsense to me. And then he asked me, he did this weird thing. It was kind of like I felt like I was being almost attacked because he was so nice, this guy. And then he just turned to me and said, how old are you? And I went, 17. I blurted it out before I knew what happened. Then he ushered me out of the building, and that was it. But they're interesting because they managed to get people in there on these personality tests and other things under the guise of, hey, you're kind of messed up a little bit, but that's okay. We can help you out. Is that the main recruiting tool still to this day?
Yeah, still. If you walk down pretty much in front of any church, that's what their main hook is that they have a personality test that doesn't matter what you answer on it. It's going to tell you that only the works of L. Ron Hubbard could help you out. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing that people don't really seem to get is that it originally was never supposed to be a religion, that it didn't start out as a religion. It actually started out as self-help therapy, basically. It's basically like a different form of talk therapy, and it was a big fad in the 50s. This is what it started out as. When Dianetics came out, it was the modern science. That was what he was trying to sell it as. But of course, with science, the problem is you have to be able to reapply it. Yeah, and also even more dangerous to Elron, a science means that it can be learned and then it can be done alone without that scientist there. And so he started to go bankrupt. And then when you create a religion, then you can literally have everything be theology. You can accuse anybody who's attacking your criminal construct that they themselves are bigots and religious fascists. You see them do this all the time.
Oh yeah.
When people they're like, "How dare you question my beliefs?" I'm like, I don't believe their beliefs. I believe they're a criminal organization. I believe it's a hustle. If it is such sacred scripture, why do you have to buy it? When you walked in when you were 17, they're not going to tell you everything that they believe. They're going to say that we want to help you, and you're going to take this personality test, which no doubt shows that you're a neurotic, damaged individual, and we're going to tell you why. And it's going to cost you this much to sit there and hold electrified juice cans hooked up to a polygraph device and confess to me all of your innermost thoughts, your perversions, anything that you've done wrong. And I'm going to record all of them, and I'm going to put them in a filing cabinet. And actually, I own those confessions. You don't. I own them. And there is no client psychiatrist privilege. So God forbid you want to leave. I have all of that sitting in a box that just so happens I might want to use against you. I have. Right. I mean, that's the basic level of it. That's the first couple steps. And then when you get into the larger scope of it, what they're not telling you is all of their internal secret stuff that we know now, that because it's just all over and they can't stop the internet. But stuff like Xenu and stuff that when you were walking in, there's no way they ever would have told you that. It's possible the guy who even worked there, who's going to walk you around and show you all wrong stats, might not have even known about Xenu himself. Because those are some of the most innermost secrets. It works as a scam that sells you secrets. That's its whole hustle.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds pretty effective. Now, tell us a little bit. I'm going to ask you some more specific stuff later on about how you how you want to turn this around. But to understand what they're all about, how does someone get convinced on a personality test where pretty much all roads lead to you need help and we've got it for you? What are the let's take a look at the price schedule. Do you have any kind of information, like what kind of money are we talking about to get what kind of result as a potential client?
There's two kinds of paths. I mean, the prices have changed and are certainly variable depending on how much money you have. Often, it's very common that I've heard of people who've even worked at specific branches that they would be able to do estimates on people's monthly income and then sort of gauge their pricing throughout that. But I mean, it's going to run you into thousands and thousands of dollars. If you don't have the money, then they're going to encourage you to try to work on staff where you can get paid anything from, just chump change, like $5-10 a week. They want to sell you that you're basically working for your own salvation or working to save the planet. So why should I be paying you a lot of money for this?
Right.
That money's not an issue. We're trying to save the world.
That's why we have so much of it. I guess that's why they have.
I think the end estimate to get to the very top, which is OT level 8, which means that you're almost like a superhuman god, psychic, powerful being that can move objects at will with your mind and go through space and time. That I think that will cost you about $500,000.
Seems a bit outrageous to have to spend all that money, but I guess that's why Tom Cruise is so successful. I figure if it's tethered to your income, they must be making a lot of money off of him with all of those blockbuster movies.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing that's interesting about Tom Cruise is that Tom Cruise has, in a way, become actually a contradiction. At first, he was one of their champions that they were using as a form of legitimacy and a way of, kind of proving to the rest of the world that this isn't scary. Tom Cruise, good old Tom Cruise, he's a Scientologist. And then now it's actually backfired on him because of the fact that he's been so passionate and vociferous in the press that it's actually has now become kind of a weird, strange, and wary example for a lot of people.
Right.
And the issue is that, Tom Cruise he's OT level 8, so he's literally at the top of the spiritual ladder. And for, the money and everything else, I'm sure that is not a factor for him. But I mean, you literally have to believe that Tom Cruise has these superpowers that L. Ron is talking about.
Well, listen, I got to say right here, as much as I disagree with everything I've heard coming out of the L. Ron camp, and I don't understand that about Tom Cruise. It's not like we're friends or anything, but I do enjoy some of his films. And that one, that Mission Impossible, where he's swinging around outside of that Burj Dubai, that tallest building in the world. I mean, he wasn't at the peak of it or anything, but that really was him. He really was swinging around that thing, and I thought, well, I can't do that. Maybe that's Scientology 5 or 6 by the time you can feel comfortable enough to swing around that thing.
That is called a safety harness.
Yeah, sure. Sure, I know it is.
Level psychic magic.
Okay, but I mean, I'll tell you, if I walk, you know how it is. If you walk across a plank, no problem, 2 feet off the ground, right? Say it's a foot wide or 2 feet wide, no problem. And then stick that up in the sky, it's a whole different deal. That's something in your head.
Right.
Now, he's, I guess, managed out a contract, get rid of that thing somehow. I still have it. If I'm way the hell up high on something, a plank or something like that, I'm a little nervous about it, like I wouldn't be down on the ground. And it seems unreasonable to me that I would. It seems like I could just say, look, it's 2 feet wide. You're not going to have a problem. Just go. And maybe that's some of the kind of trickery, some kind of improvement that they were going for in the first place. But he seems to have nailed that part.
I like him in movies just fine.
But it's hard to think of him as this other thing. Now, did you enjoy the very famous and hilarious South Park episode? I think about 8 years ago came on and shredded these guys.
Yeah, actually, I mean, the first time I saw that, my mouth was hanging open because I couldn't believe how deep they were going for the jugular.
Yeah,
because what they're talking about in that episode, which is they're literally giving the whole Xenu origin myth. Is you have to understand that for decades that was one of the most dangerous and tightly kept secrets within the Scientology theology. In fact, that was known as OT level 3, known as the Wall of Fire. It was called the Wall of Fire because this is what they argued, is that if your sanity was not prepared and you had not done the proper Scientology practice and teachings and rituals to achieve this knowledge, that you would literally catch pneumonia and die, or your brain would literally fracture from the sheer enormity of the truth of it, and you would lose your mind. You would literally cause instantaneous psychosis. I'm not making this up. This is the threats that they would tell people. They're like, you're not ready. I can't tell you this because you're not ready. But, oh, man, once you finally get it, you're gonna truly have your brain unlock to this whole world. And they would give you this OT level 3. You keep getting told about it, and you're just trying to earn your way to this level. And then they give it to you in a briefcase that would be handcuffed to your wrist. You're led to a special room that's put under security, under watch, and then you open it up, and then that's the first time, after decades of being in the church, spending a good amount, God knows how many thousands of dollars, then you open it up, and then you get a little Xerox of a document that 75 million years ago there was an evil galactic warlord named Xenu who blew up a whole alien species in volcanoes. And so, and then that's the thing, though, is that dark secret to a Scientologist, what's important about it is that as ridiculous as it is for us to hear about an evil galactic warlord and Xenu and all that, the more important thing to a Scientologist is that's the first time that they realize that in their theology, that their body is actually possessed by the souls of dead aliens. Before that, you believe that you're just one godlike spirit inhabiting this body, moving through time and moving from body to body. But it's at that level that actually you realize that you are possessed by hundreds of other dead, traumatized alien souls that are floating around our planet since this intergalactic genocide.
And they kind of get gunked. They get gunked up in your own being. Is that what it is? Oh, geez.
Yes, and that they're possessing your body, and that these floating spirits are basically getting programmed on these orbiting spaceships, and they're basically bring with them all of these kind of insane constructs like religion and morality and so forth, and they're inhabiting your body, and then you need to spend thousands of dollars to sit into a room by yourself at this point, giving talk therapy, holding electrified juice cans to a polygraph, talking to these dead alien souls. And so to a Scientologist, this is deathly serious, and it's also scary. Now, of course, it's also completely preposterous and utterly insane. And a lot of people, when they reach that level, they have a difficult time wrestling with it, because I think it's, for many of them, is when they really start to realize this is insane. This is, some of them break at that point.
Sure.
Some people leave right at that point. Some of them also start to realize, like, good God, a science fiction writer is telling me this, and he's telling me this is theological fact. And also that it makes people really kind of schizoid, because all of a sudden they feel that they are literally possessed by all of these beings. And that is kind of the definition of multiple personality. I mean, that's a difficult thing for a brain to rationally deal with, and to see all of South Park just do that so mercilessly. Oh, yeah. Like 3 minutes of just completely blast this really dangerous, contentious, controversial, chapter of Scientology that I'm sure that they wish that they could rewrite at this point, now that L. Ron's gone. I'm sure they wish they could get rid of.
Now, where do you suppose they got that information, though, those guys? I mean, I don't know if you're just surmising, but that's it? It was
the internet and people who've left. I've met some of the people who actually first put it up online. People who left later in the 70s and the 80s, and they were enraged because they had spent 20 years of their life trying to get up this bridge. And then they finally get to these top secret elite levels of spiritual technology, and then they learn that it's a bunch of psychotic science fiction soap opera bullshit. Yeah. And they're utterly horrified, especially when they leave. Imagine how angry you would be that you had been led along on this long pyramid scam, and that you had basically paid people, that they had convinced you to pay them to brainwash yourself to a point of, and knowing that there's so many people who are below you that are fighting and paying, working to find out this top secret information, and you've seen it. So some of these people, they would leave, and they would take some of the documents with them, and they would convey them along, and there was a lot of, like, secret people, there's some just folks who put it out there in the world, and they're like, look, they're trying to sell you these secrets. You need to know what they are, because you need to know where this is going. And the rest of the world didn't really know what that is. So for South Park to do that, I mean, that was huge. I don't even think a lot of the world had any idea how ballsy that was for them to do it.
Well, I figure it came across to a lot of people like it was just someone's, just taking a crazy take and running with it and dreaming up a bunch of nonsense. And I'm sure a lot of people took it that way. I happen to think at the time, I remember seeing it thinking, wow, I think these guys have really nailed it. But I remember other people just thinking, they were just kind of being silly on top of the few silly things that we've already heard publicly so far. And they were, one friend of mine was shocked to learn later on that, that there was so much truth to everything that was in that broadcast. So I think a lot of people just thought it was a bunch of nonsense, and they don't even appreciate how even more funny it is because it is true. I mean, it would be funny if you made it all up the way they wrote it, but the fact that they hardly changed anything at all was amazing.
Well, what's so damaging about it is that Scientology, when the 17-year-old you walked into a Scientology mission and you asked to take a personality test, is that they would not be able to tell you this is ultimately what you're going to find out and this is ultimately what we believe. They will not tell you that. In fact, they cannot tell you that because they actually believe that you will have a psychotic break if I tell you about Xenu, that you will catch pneumonia and die, that you will get sick because your psyche cannot handle the actual truth. And so when someone like South Park does that, like, people lose their shit, in Scientology because they're like, oh my God, like, in a way, the true believers view that you just almost sentenced most of humanity to death or like psychotic breaks who just watch this. In fact, that's the reason why the volcano is on the Dianetics covers. That's the reason why volcanoes are their thing, because they're literally trying to give a subconscious trigger to the alien souls that possess our body to remind them of their genocide and to cause agitation that's going to cause us to run inside of a Scientology mission. I mean, most religions are in a way have a certain kind of like, they have like an internal upper level. I guess you could argue. I mean, the Catholic Church is a
hierarchy. Yeah, absolutely.
But there's usually not another book that you have to like earn your way into learning.
No.
You know what I mean? It's not like you start with Genesis and then you have to be able to run a mile, do 20 push-ups, and be able to do the Lord's Prayer before I give you Deuteronomy. You know what I mean? And then like only the best, the best of the best, worked in a friggin' orphanage in Brazil for 50 years. Then, only then, can I give you the book of Revelations. Right. That's only for the few and the proud.
Wow.
And you have to pay for them each time.
Big money, big money too, isn't it?
Psychology they fight for.
It is a lot of money they want for those books. Yeah. So who was it? Was it your great grandfather, the originator? Who was it, and what was the? Are you aware of the team of tail spinners, I guess, who came up with all this stuff to put in there?
I mean, he had people that helped him a little bit in the early days. Some would argue in a lot of ways, but I mean, he burned all of them. He wanted to make sure in the end that his is the only name that survived through all of it. But it was all L. Ron. I mean, that's also the danger of the DNA and the theology of the cult itself is that it's all L. Ron, and it's basically written into all of its practices that you cannot change his words. You cannot change its applications, and you can't add to it. You can't destroy any of it. So they're pretty much stuck with this theology. They're stuck with Xenu. They can't change it. And that's why when critics battle against it, it's such a useful weapon, because they can't alter that course, because it's written into it that Elron is the source. He's literally called source in the theology, the cult itself. Because everything comes from him. And they don't necessarily view him as God as much as they kind of view him as like Leonardo da Vinci, like one of the greatest explorers, scientists of the mind. They don't necessarily like worship him as they view him as an amazing, like one of the greatest souls that have ever been on the planet, like the provider of truth. Because the main whole theology is that everyone is God's. But within the cult itself, it's all hero worship of him. They have an office. That office that they showed you, I'm sure, when you were 17, is probably still there.
Yeah, well, it's still there. Same corner,
yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in nearly every Scientology mission that I know of, and this is true, I've met people who have actually built these actual rooms themselves, who did the construction on the rooms, is that nearly every mission has an office that is waiting for Elron to return from his intergalactic travels. And they have a pack of cool menthol cigarettes sitting there, and his pen's just laid out just right. Because, he didn't die. He actually he dropped his meat. He left his meat vessel and is now piloting around the universe, getting more research and data.
And when was his actual physical demise? What year was that? 86
in
or
the
5?
80s, it was 85, 89. I forget. It was literally on the day the Space Challenger exploded.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I remember
on the day that the space shuttle.
When I went in there, they told me he'll be back someday. We don't know when, but he'll be back. And that's why we keep it ready for him. I just thought, really?
This was in the 70s, right?
Yeah, 79, 80, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he was already in hiding at that point.
Yeah.
He only had a couple of years left.
Yeah, that's what they told me.
They were actually being completely honest. I'm sure they actually had no idea when he would ever come back.
But I just got a sense at the time, I thought, well, if you folks think he's coming here to this one, I mean, you guys have buildings all around the world, and if he's going to die, then I don't know why he's going to come to this one, but thanks for leaving his coffee cup out. I mean, these people were dedicated. All right, we have Jamie DeWolf. He's the great-grandson of a crazy man, L. Ron Hubbard. Did pretty well for himself, though, obviously. Managed to live a comfortable existence, I guess, even if he was hiding. Do you know anything about that? Was he on a boat floating around the world for a while? Is that true? Or, I mean, he had to be hiding somewhere.
He was on a boat for a long time. He was on a boat for about 10 years. And then after that, he went into hiding for about another 10. And he was still getting, according to the accounts of people who were around those days, he was getting some briefcases full of cash coming in, and was slowly becoming more and more unsettled, more and more. He would just go into like hysterical temper tantrums, according to people who were there. Very few people actually knew him personally near the end days, and because he was just completely off the radar. And he's still, in some ways, according to them, they believe there's a person who was there near the end who's given some accounts from that, and that they say that basically he was still doing the e-meter himself, that he himself was in some ways a believer of what he was trying to espouse. And I think in many ways it worked with his psyche. I think in many ways it worked with his just like overall worldview. Some of the whole alien possession and a lot of the paranoia and the way that they dealt with their critics and their opposition was very much informed by just his general psychology. It's like general narcissism and way of attacking anybody that wanted to know who he truly was behind the curtain.
Well, just before I get into something a little more specific, I just wanted to get an off-the-top remark from you, if that's possible, regarding the movie that was out, I think it was a couple of years ago, or maybe 13, called The Master. Have you seen that?
Absolutely, yes.
What was your take on that, just for people that didn't see it? The late Philip Seymour Hoffman played a very similar type, apparently, to L. Ron Hubbard, and it was a very good film, very well acted, no kidding, because that guy was involved. But what did you think about it?
I thought it was solid. It's absolutely about Scientology, dead on. In a way, it's a little neutered to me. They kind of, dulled down their fangs on it. In some ways, I feel like it's actually, I think even a Scientologist could argue it's generally a fair shake on who L. Ron was to even his followers. They make a lot of internal references that some people might not understand, like a buried book. They're referring to Excalibur, this famous volume of L. Ron that no one's ever read, that supposedly a publisher read and immediately threw themselves out of a window to their death because they couldn't take it. This was before Dianetics came out. I thought that in many ways it's a good movie. It's solid on its own right cinematically.
Sure.
In many ways, it's kind of the least fascinating era of Scientology to me, which is mostly the 70s and 80s, where they're just completely running rampant and breaking into governments and running across the world and creating their own secret military faction and this like pseudo Navy, outfit and this like elite group of knighthood that all believe that they have these eternal souls battling for the world's salvation. That stuff is pretty fascinating. I'm hoping for another film, or I might have to make that film someday myself. But I think on the whole that it was good. But I think that in many ways, I would have really been excited to see something like that didn't have any fear of Scientology retaliation, because I feel like they had to change some of it
Well, that's maybe that.
You know what I mean?
Makes sense why they. I totally do. That's probably why they dialed it down, and it's as good as it gets right now with people afraid to. I know some people that won't even mention the word Scientology on their talk shows. Other people that I know in the business, and they just won't even bring it up. They'll talk about it privately, but they don't want to put it on the air. Whereas here I am sitting with you, trying to get it all out there. I guess I don't really care too much because, heck, I'm not on the list that you're on. You're on the list of 25 most dangerous peoples to Scientology, or what's the title of it? I mean, that's a great thing to be.
Yeah, I was a little scared when I realized I was going to be on that list also.
Oh, should I delete that from the show? Let's delete this from the show. Okay, we'll just leave it. I'm not really going to do it, though. All right. Now, specifically, you were recently, I've got an article here, I guess you might know the one I'm speaking of, where you were in Florida and you were telling people that you were comfortable now with some strange writings that were attributed to L. Ron Hubbard Jr., and that is, was that your father, right? He's the son of the founder. Is that right?
And my grandfather.
Your grandfather.
My grandfather.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's a bit of an odd story going on there with the influence of the occult on the Hubbard folks to get Scientology going in the first place. Now, okay, we talked about the master talking about it at a bit of a lukewarm phase. Tell us about this. What kind of occult influence is on? And when people say occult, too, that shouldn't be a terrible thing. That just means folks don't know what it is. So occult means hidden. So what kind of things were in the brew there when this thing was being dreamed up?
Well, a lot of people who have talked out against the cult and against L. Ron specifically, I've learned over time to almost not even go into this era because it just sounds so preposterous and insane that some people just turn their brains off. L. Ron Jr. was the same thing when he started talking about this and coming out and being public. But is in the years right before L. Ron wrote Dianetics, L. Ron had come out of the military, he had come back from the war, and through some sort of odd circumstance, he ran into Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was literally a rocket scientist who's also one of the biggest American benefactors of Aleister Crowley, who this is all documented. So none of this is absurd. None of this is any of that. And L. Ron Hubbard met him. Aleister Crowley is, of course, Order of Golden Dawn. He also called himself the Great Beast.
Yeah.
And very specifically was involved in, for lack of a better term, black sex magic.
Yeah.
And
from what I've read, a bit of a jackass. Anyway, sorry, that's a personal assessment.
Growing up Christian, I know that people hear those words and they're like, ooh, spooky.
Right.
And I actually don't really believe in magic. I believe in force of will. I believe that you can manifest things through your own actions and so forth. But growing up Christian, it's just like, hearing the amount of things that are labeled and branded satanic through lack of any kind of general understanding always made me a little hesitant to even go into this. But the fact of it is that L. Ron believed in this, Jack Parsons believed in this, and they did a lot of black sex magic rituals to try to actually create the Whore of Babylon, the Scarlet Woman. They did a whole lot of acts like this, reading a lot of ancient texts and doing a lot of rituals to try to manifest these beings into physical form. Also, that there was a lot of magic intonations that L. Ron really believed in, and the hypnotism and the trance-like qualities of these rituals, he later sort of rewrote and interwove into what later became Scientology itself and Dianetics, that a lot of those kinds of rituals were the mechanics that he was using in order sort of to crack open minds. This is what L. Ron Jr., who was like 18, 19 when he regrouped with his father, and in a lot of what he says in this memoir is that's what his father was very specific to him about behind closed doors, is that these are the true secrets on what Scientology is actually all about, and that this is a way of cracking people open, and in a way that the only thing that matters is your own will, and that is it. And in many ways, it was just kind of like a very occultic way of empowering sociopathic, misanthropic behavior, of that absolutely just hammering into his son is that there is no such thing as a conscience. There's only your will. That's it. And that he, in many ways, was smashing his own will into other people's minds through the use of a lot of these techniques. And they had an incredibly tumultuous relationship. But early on, he was widely viewed as that he was going to be the heir at some point, someday. And it was clear it was a very personal, intense relationship that they had. And his father was rather open to him about some of this stuff. And he name-checks a lot of these specific books, a lot of these specific rituals, and people that were involved in those early ages, which is all stuff that L. Ron never talked about publicly. He never referred to that time. He never, openly avowed any sort of occultic background or roots to anything in Scientology whatsoever. And it brings a much darker and harder edge to what it is in actuality, which is a whole different board game than what
absolutely.
They're trying to sell you of it being science. And that's the thing, is that Elron was never honest about his motivations. He was never honest about his true roots. He was never honest about his true goals and ambitions for a lot of it. And the fact that he was such a deeply invested member of this kind of sect and these sort of rituals, and then would later completely, not speak about it at all, was very indicative of the fact that there's a lot going on in the early origin and the roots days that are incredibly dark and dangerous that people just don't know about, and they don't want to talk about, and they certainly don't want brought to light.
Well, I was going to say, if we were able to collate some of these darker origins and some of the things that he dipped into to create this, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who, or a lot of people in general, let's say, who at one time thought, maybe I'll give this a try. Maybe it is a good thing. I've been a Christian for a while. That didn't work out for me, and, et cetera. And they kind of just sort of, go down the sampler bar of the different religions. And if you're going to try out Scientology, it seems like, well, they say they can clear your mind and you can perform better, and that sounds good to me. But if those folks also knew these dark origins, I'm sure that would have some kind of measure on bringing the the membership of the church way down, I would imagine.
Right. Well, I think that's what people who are fighting against it are really trying to illustrate, is at least to be honest about what you really are and what you really believe. And that's what has been the contentious battle. That's what's been the war, is people trying to illustrate and illuminate what that actually is. And it's been raging for the past, 50-some years. Because a lot of it people don't seem to understand is that he was making up as he went along. It would start at one book, and then it would go to a next course, and then the next course, and he would call it his ongoing research. But a lot of it is that he was just literally just creating the next step of the next step of the next step. Well, the problem is that he was guaranteeing all of these powers and these psychic abilities during this lifetime.
Right.
So when he died, that there's no more steps, there's no more theology left to write. So you're only left with whatever he had that he was making up as he went, and here you are. That's it. So now he's gone. So now let's, if you think it's a science, prove it. If you actually think that these are, if it's a religion, then don't, then stop pretending it's a science. Stop pretending that it's like this is some kind of technology.
Well, do you have those? Do you have those documents yourself? Do you have the some kind of informational conduit there that shows this OTO leaning, this Aleister Crowley kind of influences on the beginning? Where can we find something like that?
A lot of it has been kicked around all over because it's very darkly held secrets of kind of the old school. And
well, I'm kind of rushing you because we're kind of out of time, and I just want to get a hold of that link and see if I can put it up on our website, and let's just see how long it stays up there before it's attacked.
I would do that. Yeah, it's on Tony Ortega's site where you can catch some snippets from the talk that I gave and some of the actual transcripts from that.
Okay, well, I'm going to put that up. You'll find it, folks, pretty soon on conspiracyqueries.com. That's where you can find Jamie. We're going to have to wrap it up now, Jamie. I hope you'll come back sometime. I had a fascinating conversation with you, and I feel like it's not over yet.
Yeah, there's a lot more to go into. We didn't even talk about the Nation of Islam partnering with Scientology. That's a whole nother crazy cookie to crumble.
Well, then now I think you're going to come back on as a return guest way sooner than most people. Would you be okay with that?
That'd be fine with me.
Sounds good. Okay, well, that's Jamie DeWolf. Thanks very much for joining us today. Thanks for listening to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Please offer comments or complaints by emailing conspiracyqueries@gmail.com or on Twitter @con_queries or at our website, conspiracyqueries.com. Thanks for listening.